Hello,
So,
Thilini.
hi. So we are very pleased to have you in our discussion today.
It's my pleasure, Thilini.
Okay. So first of all, before starting the session, I would like to discuss. I would like to start the discussion with what actually food security is. Is it
Okay,
producing
Thilini.
everything at home, or is it 1990s FAO definition? So how do we know if we are really food secure in the current context right now? Over to you, Professor Jeevika.
Okay, Thilini. Food security has a very simple definition. That is, one has to have enough food to eat. But there are lots of qualifiers around this small definition. So when we say food, so we are talking about nutritious food. We are talking about safe food. And also when we say one needs to have food, actually it's not a single individual. We like to see everybody is having access to food at all times, not just once a day or twice a day. Whenever the person needs food, food should be accessible physically as well as economically, meaning that one has to have money to purchase food if that person does not grow or rare animals to produce his or her own food. And also this food should be according to our dietary preferences. You, if you do not like to eat something, then of course having that food is not important or not relevant. And in order to be food secure, you have to have food that uh, uh, tallies with your own preferences. And also this food should meet dietary needs to have an active and healthy life. You should utilize that food in that manner, and that actually is the FAO definition. But there is a small misconception among many, and people think that food security is growing your own food at home, meaning that when a country produces its own food requirement, we say that the country is self-sufficient in food. But some people uh, interchangeably use food security versus food self-sufficiency, which is wrong. So what I have given you is the FAO definition for food security.
Okay, well understood, and that is a great explanation for the food insecurity, because most of the people right now they are undergo with kind of sort of food
Mm.
insecurity right now with the current crisis situation in Sri
Mhm.
Lanka. So with that, I would like to know what is the present status of food insecurity in our country. So are we really secure with food amidst the crisis, or what is the real situation right now in Sri Lanka? Over to you, Professor
Yeah,
J.
yeah. So when it comes to the definition of food security, it is very clear. Like you have to have sufficient food to meet your dietary requirement. But how are we going to measure it? That of course is a challenge. So what people do is they look at whether sufficient food is available in the country. If we uh, see that food is either locally produced or imported, and food is made available to its citizens, then we can be happy that sufficient food is available in the country. And also we need to make sure that this food is affordable to households. So meaning that people should have enough money, meaning that prices are to be lower and incomes are to be high enough to purchase this food. And also once you eat this food, you should be able to utilize it. So we look at dimensions of this sort in order to measure food security. That is food availability, food affordability or accessibility, and food utilization. So in addition to this, we like to look at whether food supplies are stable. Like can you see food at all times? Are we seeing episodes with very high food prices? So stability in availability, access, and utilization are also to be looked at when you measure food security. So when you use different measures, you end up with different answers. Obviously, one cannot come up with a single measure to look at all dimensions of food security. However, people generally understand hunger, starvation. There are simple ways of looking at it. So, if you look at what FAO did recently, FAO did some surveys together with the WFP, that is World Food Program, to assess food security situation, and FAO actually looked at food availability side, and WFP looked at food security from the household side, and WFP came up with some estimates, and these are the most recent and also the most uh, comprehensible. So we can look at these numbers, and we can sense the status. So if I may share with you their most recent numbers, I'm looking at their January report, and what they say is that 37% of our households are food insecure, meaning that over one third does not have sufficient food to eat. And if you look at the situation in 2019, it was less than 10%. So food insecurity has increased. And if you look at the way that these households manage food insecurity, you see that they apply various coping strategies. And some eat less preferred food, and some have reduced their portion sizes, and some have reduced number of meals. So people have adapted different strategies to cope up with this situation, and some of these strategies have some long lasting effects. You know that if a child is malnourished, you will see the effects not only today but also even after 10, 15 years. Once the child becomes an adult, he or she will be less productive, and that actually will be really adverse to the entire economy, not only to that person, not only to that household, but also to the entire nation. And also, the surveys conducted by WFP shows that we are facing high as well as volatile prices, meaning that food stability is at a stake. And also, the FAO surveys as well as WFP surveys show that the country does not have sufficient stocks of certain food items. So, food availability is threatened, food affordability is threatened, food utilization is threatened, as well as food stability is threatened. So, we are in a very bad shape, I would say.
Yeah, of course. I too agree with you, Prof. Jeevika. Right now, people are too much struggling with assuring their
Yeah.
food security, of course.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah. So, actually, I would like to draw your attention on what sort of factors affecting this food security right now in Sri Lanka.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, what made Sri Lanka insecure in food during recent past? So, any socio-economic, global, or political factors which affecting to this situation right now? Just wondering about your perspectives on that front.
Yeah, it's good that you are asking me my perspectives. I can actually give you a list of things, but it is very difficult to say which one affected the most for the relative contribution of these factors. So these are the things that we as researchers and academics should estimate. But according to what I have read so far, uh, I cannot find good analysis on the relative contribution of different factors. But I can give you my perspective. So, when you look at the situation, I feel that the most influential factor is the rise in food prices. So you saw that prices went up compared to 2021 situation. By September, October, food prices rose close to 100%. So that was unbelievably high. And when it comes to certain food items like chicken, eggs, fish, the prices went up by more than 200%. So that was unbearable. And why the prices went up? Several reasons. One is due to the exchange rate hike. If you plot our exchange rate and food prices, you see that over the last few months, it was mostly due to the rise in exchange rate. Rise in the sense that devaluation of our currency. So that is one of the biggest reasons. And also you see that we have erected so many import barriers. Most of the food items were subjected to import tariffs and special commodity levies. So that also contributed to rise in food prices. And also we took out some of the ceiling prices that we had. So that also contributed. And of course, everybody talks about the uh, effects of the chemical fertilizer import ban, and that was one of the topmost reasons for the uh, drop in production, which resulted in rise in prices. So those are some of the key reasons why food prices went up. But if you look at the situation in different sectors, you will see that different sectors affected differently due to different reasons. For an example, rise in milk price was due to increase in import taxes, and the rise in chicken prices and egg prices was mainly due to low availability of maize in the country, and that was a result of chemical fertilizer import ban. So you can trace certain linkages, but as I initially said, it was mainly due to a rise in food prices. But on top of that, some people lost their jobs in the middle of the economic crisis. You very well are aware that the bank interest rates went up, so most of the businesses, particularly small businesses, became very vulnerable, and people lost jobs. So affordability affected seriously, but that was coupled with uh, food unavailability as well. So several reasons, and also the world market conditions were not to our favor, and fuel prices went up, fertilizer prices went up, wheat prices went up. So uh, the the combined effect was devastating.
Yes, that makes sense, Professor Javik. Actually, there are a lot of factors which affect the current food insecurity in
Mm,
Sri Lanka, and that we can't measure what factors is being affected most, because right now there are a lot of factors and in detail
yeah,
analysis is needed right
yeah,
now to assess
yeah,
the
yeah.
strength and assess the impact of these
Hmm,
factors.
hmm,
Yeah. So also I would like to draw your attention on the impacts or the consequences of this food insecurity in our country. Especially, I
hmm,
would like to know what segments of the community are mostly affected by food insecurity right now, and what sort of impacts are right now is being on the head of them. So
yeah,
just know
yeah.
about front as well.
Yeah, so in terms of the most affected groups, of course, there are certain groups who were anyway vulnerable, like even before the pandemic, before the economic crisis. Their status of food insecurity was very high, and there are vulnerable groups like pregnant mothers, lactating mothers, and also people in the estate sector, particularly tea workers and urban poor, and also certain communities live in very remote areas without market access. They anyway were having issues with respect to, excuse me, food insecurity, and their condition worsened. But with the newest shocks to the economy, we can see that lots of people in the middle class also got affected, and also people who work in the informal sector. So you can see that many groups are now adding to the existing group of food insecure people, and among them are uh, people who borrowed loans from the banks for house construction or investments in various businesses, and they had to pay very high interest rates, and that actually sacrificed some of their lavish expenditures on food as well. So, and also we see that rural sector was not badly affected compared to the effect on the urban sector, and the urban people generally rely on LP gases than fuel wood. Like their houses and kitchens are constructed in such a way that you cannot use fuel wood. So that with the uh, with the shock to the petrol and diesel prices, their situation was worsened. So that actually was the very first trigger to Aragalaya. So
Yeah.
we see that there was a rise in the urban sector. Yeah. So
Yeah.
different effects due to different reasons.
Different reasons on different segments of the community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So, as far as we have researched on this area on food insecurity and the stuff, so we have heard of a lot of programs right now. Right
Mm,
now, are in the place, such as cash transfer programs, samudhi
yeah,
programs, and school meal programs, and three post
yeah,
programs. Those programs are in place to ensure food security in the country.
yeah.
So I would like to know the existing gaps in these programs and also suggestions to improve the system as per your perspective.
Yeah, so before I talk about gaps, I would like to share with you about the good things that the government of Sri Lanka did. Of course, when somebody does something good, we
Yeah,
should
yeah,
appreciate,
of
right? I
course.
think the government was very, how should I say, government was very quick to react. Remember, when the pandemic came, the first thing the government did was lowering of uh, food prices, particularly with respect to dal and tin fish, and also the rice was under a ceiling price, sugar was under a ceiling price. Those things were not changed. So the when the government was okay with the finances, government provided some good support to the households, and I think these helped to stabilize the food security status of the country during the pandemic. But what happened was that with the economic crisis, we actually could not manage our balance of payment issue. So this is actually a macroeconomic shock, and the government had to cut down imports. I think that was the biggest effect on the food economy of Sri Lanka. So this restriction on imports, not only food imports but also chemical fertilizer and pesticide imports. So that was not a wise decision, even though initially we took some good decisions, and the agriculture was not uh, not curtailed to a greater extent during the pandemic time. So people were cultivating their lands. So, so that kind of things. And also, the government liberalized clearing of essential food from the ports during the pandemic. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that government did some good things during the pandemic time, but thereafter the government could not proceed with such due to the fiscal deficit. And fiscal deficit actually made the government to uh, rely on some extreme measures like complete banning of certain food items as well as raw materials to the industry. Yeah.
Yes, I too agree with you, Professor Jeevika. So right now the government is struggling with kind of allocating the budget for these social welfare systems and
Mm,
those programs to ensure food security within the country.
mm,
So if we can draw country other best practices, so the best practices from other countries in the region and also as well as out of the region to the existing system. So
mm,
can we discuss or can we know what sort of global examples of how food security is assured during the similar crisis in other countries,
mm.
and that we can adapt to our country context to solve the issue?
Yeah, so I would like to uh, bring an example from what countries generally do in terms of the crisis. The immediate thing that comes to your mind is closing the borders and doing our own businesses, right? So that is the immediate reaction. But when you look at the costs and benefits of that, actually, what you should do is to open up your borders and collaborate and cooperate with the global community. So many countries actually during the 2008 food crisis closed their borders, and they realized the cost of closing borders. So during this crisis, uh, certain countries actually followed a very liberal approach, but we went by a very traditional inward looking strategy, and we have been trying to protect the domestic economy, saying that that is the way to go. And if you look at some of the programs that the government uh, initiated during this crisis times, they do not look uh, meaningful. For an example, uh, can you really expect home gardens to provide your own food? Of course, home gardens are good. Like when people have free time, they can cultivate some leafy vegetables in their home gardens, and they can, have few trees. That is good. Like that can supplement some food, but you simply cannot go by a home garden project as a food security project. And what I should emphasize here is that you should not think that food security is something that can be achieved through agriculture sector interventions alone. Actually, food insecurity is a broader development problem. And if you really want to solve food insecurity problem, then you will have to have some multi-sectoral approach where different sectors should get together and formulate a strategy. So agriculture sector or agriculture ministry and related ministries like land, water, and livestock, they can contribute to this largely, but you will have to work with ministries like trade and also consumer affairs and education, health and education play a huge role when it comes to food utilization. And when it comes to food stability, uh, consumer affairs and trade play a huge role. And also rural development, employment generation is something that you should focus on if you are really interested in making a sustainable venture. So all these short-term measures will provide us some benefits, but they will not last long. So you have to have a strong development strategy rather than tiny little programs like home gardening programs to make some food available in your homestay.
Yeah, so I do agree with what you have mentioned in terms of how we can overcome this food insecurity problem in uh,
Hmm.
in terms of short to medium to long term.
Hmm.
So with that context, I would like to know about any other market-driven approaches or any kind of measures that we can use to improve the productivity or domestic productivity within the country, and also to ensure the farmers are more in kind of facilitate farmers are being more facilitated by the system right now, and to encourage the specifically to encourage the domestic production, any measures that we can give
Yeah,
from that point?
yeah. So if you are focusing on domestic food production, then you will have to understand the critical constraints in preventing the growth of domestic food sector. So when you look at the domestic food sector, you see that still we have issues with raw materials. uh, of course, productivity improvements are needed, but insufficient availability of raw materials is one of the serious issues in the country right now these days. Like not having access to chemical fertilizers and not having access to credit and also not having access to output markets are serious issues in the sector, and we will have to resolve them. And as a long-term strategy, we need to have a good system that promote investments and also research. Like you need to invest on research to bring in new technologies, and the private sector should be encouraged to invest in agriculture, both in research and development. And we really need a broad based strategy of that sort to overcome or alleviate the problem of food insecurity.
So of course, so those recommendations and policy solutions would make real important, make real benefits to our society, and also specifically policymakers can do or the change the existing system with the use of these recommendations. So I believe these policy solutions and recommendations that you brought in today's discussion would be really important to solve the issue of the food crisis with the current context of the Sri Lankan context. So yeah, so I so with this conversation, I think we can. Come to a end of this session right now, Professor Jeevika. So thank you very much for being with us around half an hour with this discussion and giving your valuable inputs or valuable insights to this session. So your expertise in the field will be highly invaluable for this session, and thank you once again. So also, I would like to thanks for our audience, and also for our listeners and our followers. Also, I would like to remind our audience to follow us on all our social media platforms and stay updated with more chats like this and also other works that we do. So once again, thank you very much, Professor Jevika, and thank you very much, everyone. So have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you, Thilini. Okay.